The freedom of letting go. Have you ever watched an old tree in autumn, its leaves turning golden and slowly drifting away with the wind? It doesn't cling to them. It doesn't fight the change. It simply lets go, gracefully, naturally, knowing that each falling leaf is not a loss, but a transition into something new. Aging is a lot like that. As we grow older, something shifts within us. The things that once felt urgent, the need to be surrounded by people, to maintain endless social connections, to always be in touch, start to lose their grip on us. And yet society has told us for so long that having a large circle of friends is the key to happiness, that staying socially active is the only way to avoid loneliness. But what if that's not true? What if, after 70, you don't need a large group of friends to feel fulfilled? What if the greatest companionship you could ever have is the one you build with yourself? I know. This idea might sound unsettling at first. We've been conditioned to believe that friendships are what keep us grounded, that being alone is something to fear. But the truth is, solitude is not loneliness. In fact, it can be one of the most liberating experiences of your later years. Think about it. How many of your current friendships truly bring you joy? How many feel effortless, nourishing, and meaningful? And how many exist simply because of habit, obligation, or the fear of letting go? You may have already felt it, the exhaustion of keeping up with relationships that no longer serve you, the quiet realization that some friendships have become more of a duty than a delight. And yet you stay. You keep answering the calls, attending the gatherings, making the effort, because that's what you've always done. But here's the thing. You don't have to anymore. After a lifetime of responsibilities, raising families, building careers, maintaining social ties, you've earned the right to live on your own terms, to embrace the kind of peace that comes when you stop chasing connections and start cherishing the freedom of simply being. This is not about isolation. It's about choosing quality over quantity. It's about understanding that true happiness isn't measured by how many people are around you, but by how deeply at peace you are with yourself. So if you've ever felt guilty for wanting more solitude, if you've ever wondered whether it's okay to step back from friendships that no longer bring you joy, I want you to know this. You are not alone in feeling this way, and more importantly, you are allowed to choose a different path. In this journey, we'll explore why letting go of unnecessary friendships isn't a loss. It's a gift. We'll talk about how embracing independence can lead to a richer, more fulfilling life. And by the end of this, you may just find that solitude isn't something to fear, it's something to celebrate. Are you ready? Let's begin. You no longer need to prove yourself. There comes a point in life when you realize you don't have to impress anyone anymore. Think back to your younger years. So much of life revolved around proving yourself. You worked hard to build a career, to earn respect, to establish a reputation. In friendships, you wanted to be liked, to be included, to feel like you belonged. There was always an unspoken pressure to keep up, to fit in, to make sure you were seen as valuable. But now, at this stage of life, all of that fades into the background. You've already built your legacy. You've lived through the expectations, the judgments, the need to be validated by others. And here's the truth. You no longer need anyone's approval to feel whole. Take Harold, for example. He spent over 40 years in the corporate world, surrounded by colleagues, networking at business events, constantly maintaining social relationships that felt more like obligations than genuine connections. There was always a dinner to attend, a phone call to return, a friendship to keep alive out of professional courtesy. But the moment Harold retired, something became clear. Most of those friendships weren't built on true connection. They were based on convenience, on shared goals, on mutual benefits. When he no longer held a position of influence, the invitations stopped. The phone rang less, and for the first time Harold saw his relationships for what they really were. At first, it stung. He wondered if he had done something wrong. Had he not been a good enough friend? Had he not tried hard enough? But then a realization settled in, a sense of peace that he had never felt before. Why should he spend his energy chasing friendships that only existed because of his career? Why should he keep proving his worth to people who were never truly there for him? So Harold did something he had never done before. He let go. He stopped forcing conversations, stopped reaching out just to maintain appearances. Instead, he turned inward. He spent time rediscovering old hobbies, reading books he had put off for years, walking in the mornings with no rush, no agenda. And he found that, without the pressure to keep up with others, he felt lighter, freer. For the first time in decades, he was simply living for himself. And that's the key. So much energy is wasted on trying to maintain friendships that no longer serve us. We hold on out of habit, out of fear, out of the lingering belief that we need to be surrounded by people to feel important. But in reality, the most important relationship you will ever have is the one with yourself. The opinions of others don't define your worth. Whether or not people think of you, include you, or validate you, it doesn't change the person you are. At this stage of life, the only approval that matters is your own. Maybe you've felt this too. The slow realization that some friendships have faded, that the need to keep up no longer holds the same weight it once did. And maybe part of you still wonders if stepping away means losing something valuable. But ask yourself, what are you really losing? A connection that feels forced, a friendship that drains more than it uplifts, a relationship that only exists because you keep putting in the effort. There is nothing wrong with letting go. There is nothing wrong with choosing peace over social obligations. If a friendship no longer brings you joy, you do not owe it your time. If a relationship makes you feel like you must constantly prove your worth, it is not a relationship worth keeping. You have spent your whole life meeting expectations, proving your value, showing up for others. But now, it's time to show up for yourself. Let go of the need for validation. Release the pressure to maintain friendships out of obligation. Allow yourself the freedom to exist, not as someone seeking approval, but as someone who is already complete, because you are. Peace is more valuable than socializing. There was a time when life was filled with noise, conversations, gatherings, laughter, obligations. People were always around. Your younger years may have been spent chasing a sense of connection, filling your days with social activities, believing that staying engaged with others was the key to a fulfilling life. But then something changed. As the years passed, you started noticing a shift. The large groups became smaller. The conversations, once filled with excitement and new stories, began to repeat themselves. The energy it took to keep up with friendships started to feel more like a burden than a joy. And one day you realized that what you craved wasn't another social gathering. It was silence. Beneath all the noise, beneath the constant pressure to engage, there was something far more precious, waiting for you, peace. Take Margaret, for example. At 74, she had spent most of her life being the social glue that held her friend group together. There were lunch dates, birthday calls, holiday gatherings. She made sure no one ever felt left out. She was the one who always picked up the phone, always planned the get-togethers, always made the effort. But as the years went on, something shifted. The conversations felt repetitive, the same old stories, the same complaints, the same gossip. Some friends only reached out when they needed something. Others seemed more interested in maintaining appearances than in having real, meaningful discussions. One day, after a long afternoon of forced small talk, Margaret came home and sat in her favorite chair by the window. The house was quiet. The sun was setting, casting golden light across her living room. And for the first time in a long time, she let herself feel what had been lingering beneath the surface: exhaustion. She was tired. Tired of keeping up. Tired of conversations that drained her. Tired of the unspoken pressure to always be available. That night, Margaret made a quiet decision. She would no longer say yes to things that did not bring her peace. At first, it felt strange. She stopped returning calls immediately. She politely declined invitations she wasn't excited about. She let go of the idea that she was responsible for keeping friendships alive. And slowly, something beautiful happened. Her life became lighter. Instead of spending her mornings catching up on messages, she sat outside with a cup of tea, listening to the birds. Instead of filling her calendar with obligations, she filled it with moments that brought her true joy. Reading, painting, taking walks by the lake. And what she found was something she hadn't expected. Solitude wasn't lonely. It was peaceful. We are often taught to fear being alone. Society tells us that staying socially active is the key to happiness, but the truth is, peace is just as valuable, if not more. Think about the last time you truly sat with yourself, without distractions, without background noise, without feeling the need to be somewhere or do something for someone else. In that quiet, you start to hear yourself again. You start to reconnect with your own thoughts, your own dreams, your own inner world. You realize that the most fulfilling moments in life aren't always found in crowded rooms, but in the soft, still moments where you feel completely at ease with yourself. Maybe you've felt this too. The slow realization that some friendships are more about habit than genuine connection. The subtle exhaustion that comes from maintaining relationships that no longer bring joy. The deep desire for more calm and simplicity. And if you have, I want you to know, it's okay to step back. It's okay to choose peace over social pressure. It's okay to say no without guilt. Because at this stage of life, you don't have to prove anything to anyone. You don't have to fill your days with unnecessary activity just to feel like you're living. You get to decide what your time is worth. And if that means spending more of it in quiet, in reflection, in doing things that truly bring you happiness, then that is not loneliness, that is freedom. So the next time you feel torn between keeping up with a social obligation or simply enjoying the comfort of your own presence, ask yourself this: which one brings me peace? And let that be your answer. Fewer friends, less disappointment. There comes a time in life when you realize that not everyone you once called a friend was truly meant to stay. Friendships, like seasons, change. Some flourish, some fade, and some quietly drift away. Not because of any dramatic falling out, but simply because life takes people in different directions. When you're younger, you might hold on tightly to friendships, believing that maintaining them is a reflection of loyalty, of love, of your own worth. But as you grow older, you begin to see things differently. You start to understand that fewer friendships don't just mean fewer social obligations. They also mean fewer disappointments. William had always been the type of person who valued friendships deeply. At 78, he had seen people come and go throughout his life. Some friendships had lasted for decades, while others had faded the moment circumstances changed. He had been the friend who always reached out, always made the effort, always ensured that connections stayed alive. But as the years passed, he started to notice something. Many of these friendships were not as strong as he had once believed. When he called, some friends didn't call back. When he made plans, others cancelled at the last minute. And when he needed support, he found himself standing alone. At first, he blamed himself. Had he not been a good enough friend? Had he done something wrong? But the more he reflected, the more he saw the truth. He was always the one putting in the effort. The friendships he had held onto so tightly were not always mutual. He had been investing his time and energy into people who, at the end of the day, were not investing in him. The realization hurt, but it was also freeing. One day, he made a quiet decision. He stopped chasing people who did not value him the same way he valued them. He stopped making the first call. He stopped reaching out to those who only responded when it was convenient for them. And a surprising thing happened. The silence that followed did not feel empty. It felt peaceful. He no longer had to wonder why certain people had grown distant. He no longer had to feel disappointed when his kindness wasn't reciprocated. Instead, he poured his energy into the relationships that truly mattered. The people who had been there through the years, not because of what he could offer, but simply because they cared. Friendships, at their best, should bring joy, understanding, and companionship. But too often they come with unspoken expectations, obligations, and disappointments. You check in on someone, but they don't check in on you. You make time for them, but they rarely make time for you. And at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, why am I holding on? Is this friendship truly adding to my life, or am I keeping it alive out of habit, out of fear of letting go? It's easy to feel a sense of loss when friendships fade, but the reality is, not everyone is meant to walk with you through every stage of life. Some people are only with you for a season, and that's okay. When you stop chasing relationships that no longer serve you, You make space for the ones that do, and sometimes that means embracing your own company, realizing that solitude is not loneliness but a form of self-respect. If you've ever felt disappointed by a friendship that didn't turn out the way you had hoped, know that you are not alone. You are not wrong for expecting kindness, for hoping that the effort you put in would be returned. But also know this: you do not have to keep watering a garden that no longer blooms. You do not have to keep investing in people who do not value you. There is great peace in letting go, in understanding that the right people, the ones who truly care, will always remain, not because you chase them, but because they choose to stay. So if you ever find yourself wondering whether you should keep holding on to a friendship that no longer feels right, ask yourself, does this bring me peace? Because at this stage in life, peace is far more valuable than the weight of one-sided relationships. Let go of what no longer serves you, and trust that what is meant to remain will always find its way back to you. Time becomes more precious. There comes a point in life when you start to see time differently. When you're young, time feels endless. There is always tomorrow, always another chance, always more time to do the things you put off. But as the years pass, time no longer stretches out in infinite possibilities. Instead, it becomes something precious, something fragile, something that must be guarded fiercely. By the time you reach 70, you begin to understand that time is not just something you have, it is something you must choose how to spend. Richard, a man in his early 80s, once had a life filled with commitments. His calendar had always been full: dinners, social gatherings, weekend trips with old friends. He had spent decades maintaining relationships, making sure he was present, making sure he was available. But slowly, he began to notice a shift. The long conversations that once felt meaningful now felt like a chore. The social gatherings that used to be exciting started to feel like obligations. He would sit at dinners, listening to people complain about things that no longer mattered to him, wondering why he was spending his precious time in places that didn't bring him joy. One afternoon, after yet another lunch that left him feeling drained rather than fulfilled, Richard sat alone on his porch. The sun was warm on his face, the trees swayed gently in the breeze, and for the first time in a long time he let himself wonder, what if I stopped doing things just because I felt like I had to? What if I started choosing how I wanted to spend my time? The next time an invitation came for a social event he had no interest in, he politely declined. Instead of spending hours catching up on messages that felt obligatory, he let them sit unread. And something incredible happened. He felt free. Free from the weight of expectations, free from the pressure to be constantly engaged, free to spend his time the way he wanted to, rather than the way others expected him to. He started dedicating his days to things that truly mattered to him. He read books he had been meaning to read for years. He went on quiet morning walks, appreciating the way the world felt when it first woke up. He took up painting, not because he wanted to impress anyone, but because it made him feel alive. And in doing so, he realized something profound. Time, when spent wisely, is the greatest gift of all. So much of life is spent giving time away, to work, to obligations, to people who may not even appreciate it. But by the time you reach a certain age, you begin to understand that every moment you have left is sacred. You no longer owe your time to anyone. You no longer have to spend it doing things that drain you. Instead, you have the right to spend it in ways that nourish your soul, that bring you peace, that make you feel whole. Maybe you've felt this too. The weight of wasted time. The frustration of spending hours on things that don't bring you joy. The quiet realization that you don't have forever, and that if you don't start choosing how to spend your time now, you may never get the chance. But here's the beautiful thing. It's never too late. It's never too late to stop saying yes to things that don't fulfill you. It's never too late to step away from relationships that take more than they give. It's never too late to wake up one morning and decide that from this day forward, your time is yours. So ask yourself, if today were a gift, because it is, how would you want to spend it? Would you waste it on conversations that don't matter, on obligations that drain you? Or would you spend it on the things that truly make your heart feel light? Because at this stage in life, time is not something to be given away carelessly. It is something to be cherished, protected, and spent only on the things that bring you peace, joy, and meaning. The most important friendship is with yourself. There is a friendship in life that often goes unnoticed. It is not the companionship of an old friend, nor the connection with family, nor the people who have come and gone throughout the years. It is the friendship you have with yourself, the quiet, constant presence that has been with you through every stage of life. And yet, for so many years, you may have neglected this relationship, focusing instead on the approval and company of others. But at this stage of life, when the world slows down and the noise fades, you begin to realize that the most important friendship you will ever have is the one you build with yourself. Eleanor used to believe that happiness came from being surrounded by people. She made sure to always be in touch, always be available, always fill her days with conversations and plans. She feared loneliness, feared the quiet moments when she was left with only herself. But despite being socially active, she often felt drained rather than fulfilled. There were times when she laughed at the right moments, nodded at the right words, but inside she felt a strange emptiness. It wasn't that she disliked the people around her. It was that she had never learned how to truly enjoy her own company. One evening, after yet another gathering that left her feeling exhausted rather than uplifted, Eleanor decided to do something different. She went for a walk alone, something she had not done in years. At first it felt unfamiliar, even uncomfortable. But as she walked, she began to notice things she had never paid attention to before, the way the wind felt against her skin, the sound of the leaves crunching beneath her feet, the way the sky turned from gold to deep blue as the sun set. For the first time in a long time, she was present with herself. And for the first time, she did not feel lonely. She felt whole. That day forward, Eleanor made a conscious effort to nurture her own company. She went to cafes with a book instead of filling her time with small talk. She took herself on long drives, enjoying the peaceful solitude of the open road. She spent evenings listening to music, letting herself simply exist without the need for distraction. And in doing so, she realized something profound. She had spent so many years trying to connect with others that she had forgotten to connect with herself. Many people go through life fearing solitude, believing that being alone is something to be avoided. But there is a difference between being alone and being lonely. Loneliness comes from feeling disconnected from yourself, from needing external validation to feel whole. But when you learn to truly enjoy your own presence, solitude becomes a gift. It becomes a space where you can reflect, heal, and grow. Perhaps you too have felt this hesitation toward being alone. Maybe you have spent years filling your time with people, with conversations, with obligations, fearing that without them you would feel empty. But what if solitude wasn't something to fear? What if instead of avoiding it you embraced it? What if you treated yourself with the same kindness, the same attention, the same love that you so freely give to others? Imagine waking up in the morning and knowing that you are enough, just as you are. Imagine enjoying your own presence the way you would enjoy the company of a dear friend. Imagine not needing constant distractions to feel content, but instead finding peace in the simple act of being. The truth is, you have always been with yourself. Through every triumph and every loss, through every joy and every sorrow, you have been there. And at this stage in life, there is no greater gift than finally learning to appreciate the one person who has never left you, yourself. So, take yourself on a walk. Sit in the quiet and listen to your own thoughts. Treat yourself with the patience and understanding you have given to so many others, because the most fulfilling friendship you will ever have is not the one you find in others. It is the one you build within. Let go to receive a more fulfilling life. There is a quiet kind of freedom that comes with letting go. It is not loud or dramatic. It does not come with grand gestures or final goodbyes. Instead, it is the soft, steady realization that you no longer have to carry what no longer serves you, that you do not have to hold on to friendships out of obligation, to expectations that exhaust you, to a version of yourself that no longer fits who you have become. Letting go is not about losing. It is about making space for something better. James had spent most of his life believing that to be a good person, a good friend, he had to always be available. Even in his late 70s, he made an effort to keep up with people he had known for years, even when those relationships felt more like a duty than a joy. He answered calls he didn't feel like answering. He went to gatherings that left him feeling drained. He reached out to friends who never seemed to reach back. He told himself it was the right thing to do, that maintaining these relationships was proof of his loyalty, his character. But deep down, James felt tired, not just physically, but emotionally. The weight of keeping up with friendships that no longer felt meaningful was heavier than he had realized. One evening, after returning home from a dinner where he had spent more time listening to complaints than enjoying conversation, he sat alone in his chair and asked himself a question he had never dared to ask before. What if I stopped? What if he stopped forcing friendships that no longer felt right? What if he stopped showing up out of obligation instead of desire? What if he let go of the idea that he had to keep every connection alive, no matter how much it had faded? For the first time, he allowed himself to consider that it was okay to release relationships that had run their course, that it was okay to say no, that it was okay to choose himself instead. At first, it felt unfamiliar. When invitations came, he hesitated before politely declining. When a friend who only reached out when they needed something called, he let the phone ring. But instead of guilt, he felt something surprising: relief. A lightness he hadn't felt in years. He had been so afraid of what he might lose that he had never stopped to consider what he might gain. With the space he had created, something beautiful happened. His days were no longer filled with empty conversations, but with moments of quiet, peace. He spent his mornings sitting by the window, sipping coffee and watching the sunrise, no longer rushing to be somewhere he didn't want to be. He reconnected with old hobbies, reading books that had been sitting on his shelf for years, walking in the park simply because he enjoyed it. And in the absence of forced friendships, something unexpected happened. New connections, genuine and effortless, began to form. People who truly valued his presence naturally remained in his life, and those who had only stayed out of habit slowly faded away. Letting go is often seen as an ending, but in truth, it is a beginning. It is not about shutting yourself off from the world. It is about choosing what and who you allow into your life. It is about recognizing that not every friendship is meant to last forever, and that is not a failure. It is simply the nature of life. Perhaps you too have felt the weight of holding on. Maybe you have spent years keeping up with friendships that no longer bring you joy, answering calls out of habit, saying yes when your heart quietly longs to say no. And maybe, like James, you are afraid of what letting go might mean. But ask yourself this: what if letting go does not leave you empty? What if it opens the door to a life that is lighter, freer, more peaceful? What if it allows you to finally live on your own terms, without guilt, without obligation, without the pressure to be someone you no longer are? At this stage in life, your time is your own. You have earned the right to spend it in ways that truly fulfill you. You do not owe your energy to friendships that take more than they give. You do not have to carry the weight of relationships that no longer bring you joy. You are allowed to let go, and in doing so, you may just find that life becomes fuller, richer, and more meaningful than you ever imagined. As you reach this stage of life, something shifts. The need to keep up, to be surrounded by people, to maintain every friendship you've ever had, it begins to fade. And in its place, something else emerges. A quiet understanding, a sense of peace. The realization that the most valuable thing you have now is not the number of people in your life, but the quality of the moments you choose to spend. Letting go is not about shutting yourself off from the world. It is about making space for what truly matters. It is about understanding that friendships, like seasons, change. Some last a lifetime, others only for a chapter. And that's okay. Not every person is meant to walk with you forever, and you are not meant to carry every relationship with you as you move forward. For years, you may have spent time and energy maintaining connections that no longer uplift you. You may have held onto friendships out of habit, out of obligation, out of the fear that stepping away would leave you feeling alone. But now, you see things differently. You see that solitude is not something to fear. It is something to embrace. True fulfillment does not come from how many people surround you. It comes from being at peace with yourself, from waking up each morning and knowing that your time belongs to you, from doing the things that bring you joy, not because you feel you have to, but because you genuinely want to. Maybe this journey has already begun for you. Maybe you have felt the quiet pull toward a simpler, lighter life. Maybe you have started stepping back from friendships that no longer serve you, choosing instead to invest in yourself. And maybe, just maybe, you are starting to understand that letting go is not a loss, it is a gift. So as you move forward, ask yourself, what do you truly want the rest of your life to feel like? Do you want to spend it keeping up with relationships that no longer bring you joy? Or do you want to embrace the freedom that comes with choosing peace over obligation? The choice is yours. And whatever you decide, know this. You are enough just as you are. You always have been. If this message resonated with you, if it made you pause and reflect, I invite you to be part of this journey. Subscribe to the channel. Leave a comment and share your thoughts. Your voice matters, your experiences matter, and your presence here is valued. Together, we can continue exploring the beauty of this stage of life, the wisdom, the freedom, the peace that comes with embracing who we are. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.